3. And Recorder, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Councillor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Here.
Councillor Hassan.
Here.
Councillor Kimmy.
Here.
Councillor Teeter.
Here.
Councillor Tivnan.
Here.
Councillor Duggar. He's excused this evening. Mayor Beatty.
Here.
Thank you, Kathy. We're going to do a couple quick adjustments to the agenda just to accommodate some requests for this evening. So we'll go through visitor comments, council items, and staff items, and then we will move into our action item for agenda item 23083, which is the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 and 24 to 25 council goals and priorities work plan. So we'll go through that action item together, and then we'll go back into the normal agenda. So first off, we have visitor comments. It looks like we have Kathy French with her hand up. So as a reminder that comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Videos are not turned on for this portion of the meeting, and visitor microphones are muted throughout the meeting. With the exception of the allotted 3 minutes, visitors may state their comments and should not expect the council to engage in back and forth dialogue regarding the comments. During agenda items specifically scheduled as public hearings, I will announce a separate procedure for the council to hear public testimony relating to the subject matter of the hearing. So if you're interested in giving general visitor comment or for other agenda items tonight, please raise your hand. We'll give you the ability to speak. And if you're here to give public testimony on the hearing, which is ordinance number 4840 on vacating 2 bicycle pedestrian trail easements, then we will save your comments for when we get to that part of the meeting. So we will kick things off with Kathy French. And Kathy, when you're ready, you will have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me, okay.
Yes.
I got a letter in November of 2021 that said December 7th, the council would have a report and would have, and the minute on policing. And the minutes of that meeting said that council had done a comprehensive review. Where can I find that review? I have never seen it. And I know that your HRAC, and I'm not speaking for them, I'm speaking for myself, had requested an external review of the police, not an internal review. And I'm so wondering where that is. I thought it was promised to us. And a couple of things that make me especially interested in this external review is that recently I saw an officer rough up somebody a bit whom he was arresting. And I have heard from one of the mental health leaders in the county, I guess, how many parents are calling her to complain that officers are responding inappropriately to family members who are having mental health crises. And so I'd really like a review of what's going on. And once again, an external review. And if it's been done, just let me know where I can read it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. City Manager, is that something we can get back to Kathy on?
Absolutely, and that force review is underway. Nothing's been published yet, and we will give her a call and give her more details.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Kathy. We will get back to you. City Recorder, are there any other folks here for public comment?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we will now move to council items, and I'd love if we want to maybe test out tonight combining council items and council new business, because we have talked about condensing that down. So maybe we could try that tonight. So if there's anyone who has council items or new business to bring up, if you want to put your name in the chat, I'd be happy to give you the floor. Kevin, Councilor Teeter. How to use the translation, right?
Yep. Thanks. I've got two. One is Jewish American Heritage Month is May, and I've been talking with the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland about a potential proclamation and their interest in helping craft something like that. I'm just wondering if I can get a sense from how you all would feel about a proclamation in support of Jewish American Heritage Month, and if I could send a draft of their thoughts to staff to work through to bring to us in May. And then the second one is, I do want to let people know that we received a word that there's a fatal car crash on Murray Sunday night. We also have heard that there are also 2 recent crashes that involve Beaverton police officers who are not at fault as far as we know so far. But I just want to stress to the community members who might be watching this that we've made transportation safety one of our council priorities over the next year to 2. And we want to see a lot fewer of these because it definitely hurts all of us. So those are my 2. And Mayor, I see your hand. Oh, Council President, I'll let you take the lead. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Teeter. Mayor, what we tried last meeting is I'm going to go through everyone's comments and then I'll come back, and it also gives everyone a chance to digest. So Councilor Teeter, I've written down your request, and then it sounds like the other one was the comment. So Councilor Husson.
Sure, I can support the proclamation. I just want to give everyone a heads up. Eid is this Friday. It's a religious holiday for Muslims. Sorry, my screen's being weird. So Eid is this Friday. A couple organizations have partnered with THPRD this Sunday. It's an open to everyone event. So for those who are listening, THPRD is having an event, and you can check out more on their website. It is open to all for the Muslim community to have that celebration. The comment that I did want to make, since Councilor Teeter brought it up on transportation safety, oftentimes we want to talk about what the problem is or fix the road or fix a thing. Some of these accidents we're learning are driver error and driver choices. So I really want to encourage anyone who's listening, if you can't, if you drink, don't drive, call a friend. Please don't get in a car if you're not comfortable. Find a group of people that you can call. Many of these crashes and fatalities have actually been related to drivers that maybe shouldn't be behind the wheel and or speed. So just something for folks to know about, because that's happening. I feel like there was something else, and if it comes back to me, I'll let y'all know. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Husson. Mayor Beatty.
I reviewed last week's council meeting from when I was out. I know you guys had a conversations about proclamations then. Just want to remind you that proclamations are large bodies of work. And even though our desires to have outside people write them, they still have to go through legal checks from our city attorney and our city manager and be internally vetted. And so while external organizations are a great place to have input into what we're doing, it doesn't actually take the workload off of staff. And when we act as a body, it's intense work on the city manager, who has articulated to us that in multiple occasions. And what I think you guys agreed to in my absence last week was that we would agree to a list of proclamations and not bring forward ones that were of what continues to happen, which is one-off proclamations. I'd be happy as the mayor to issue them with you guys. I worked with Councilor Kimmy on one. There was a lot of back and forth between Councilor Kimmy, my staff, and other organizations that helped write it, particularly the KSO. But when it's done with a single elected official or me and another elected official together, it releases the quorum issue. It releases a lot of the burdens from our administrative staff. And I know Jenny has talked in great detail about how proclamations are very time consuming. And so we don't have a policy in place and what that looks like. But I know that there is not staff available to write proclamations off this when it comes to 2 or 3 week short notice. So I want to put that out there, that I'm happy to work on it and have my team work on it. But I think what we agreed to and what you guys agreed to in spirit was to continue to bring proclamations like that to the city manager. So I'd be happy to write it, but I think continuing to do it this way is not the way we should be doing it.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was actually thinking something similar just from what we discussed last time. I thought we were kind of trying to contain the list to limit the workload. But I think like it'd be really wonderful if we had requests to work with the mayor, work through the mayor's office. And then like maybe it's like a once a year thing where we look at the list and say, do we want to revise that from a council perspective? Because I know the importance of us getting to say things as a body too, and not just it coming from the mayor's office. But I think also to our community members, having it come from the mayor is very meaningful. So just with all of our dialogue last time, I would prefer that Councilor Teeter, you work with that organization in the mayor's office. And then maybe we could set a cadence. That's kind of where I am at on it. Councilor Huston.
Oh, I mean, I already, as the person who wrote the Muslim American Heritage Month proclamation, like I think that it would be meaningful if we did this as a council. I will say that I've been asking for a policy around council proclamations for us to get closer. I know I landed on a few last time. I do think there's meaning for us to do it as a council, but obviously like it's important to see where everyone kind of supports or doesn't support it. So I'll kind of let folks do a thumbs up or whatever, Councilor President, whatever you think is appropriate.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from councilors Kimmy or Tivnon, just kind of what your general feel is on the topic.
I'm
Oh, okay.
hoping you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
I love the idea of having a list that can guide in the staff time, mayor's time, any counselors who want to be involved in it, and just anticipation of proclamations that are coming. Of course, that doesn't take into consideration that some things aren't on the list and they'll come to you when someone in the community brings them to you, or when a counselor discovers that something's missing. So I think it'd be nice to have a policy in place with some flexibility to add things in as they come to us.
Thank you. Councilor Kimmy.
Yeah, my understanding was the city manager's office was putting together a list, and then we're supposed to go over some of it together or later on. That was my understanding. But either or, I want to minimize the work for the staff, one way or the other. But it is important. Sometimes we should issue proclamation to council. But those are the lists that we already decided, or we're gonna edit together. So maybe Jenny can come back, maybe explain a little bit more to us.
Yeah, it's Jenny, please.
Sure. So I do have a list of what was provided at the last meeting. My understanding of the direction is that we can, since we actually have many of these proclamations in place, we can get those scheduled. I also did respectfully ask the council that they limit that list because of, to the mayor's point about the time intensity that it takes. I would ask that perhaps if it is really important to have this additional May proclamation done, that you work with the mayor's office to get this done so that I can at least get all of the other proclamations scheduled and completed. And then at some point, and I cannot promise you within the next 6 months because we have some budgetary issues to address, to try to start that policy conversation so we can get clear on how we do this process. I think the mayor's opportunity to be the catch-all when we cannot do things or things that are more appropriate for her to issue is a really good strategy for the council to consider. But my understanding is that I'm moving forward on those 6 or that list, and I don't have that at my fingertips right now. And I'm getting those scheduled because we already had those in place. But I will follow whatever the council wants to do, but it would be a lot easier if the intent is to just get the group acknowledged and give it the attention that it deserves. It would be much easier for me if I could work with the mayor's office to have that happen, since I'm trying to get the other 6 all kind of in the queue.
Councilor Teeter, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, everybody. So Mayor, is it okay if can I reach out to your staff and share some of the comments that I've heard from this group already? And if you all want to have any conversations with them too, we can kind of go from there. Does that sound like a good next step? Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Kimmy.
I just want to come back to the traffic issue where I want to reiterate the importance of safety with regards to traffic, because one of the victims who was hit by a car is somebody that I know for the last 20 years, elderly man, was hit by a car, drunk driver, no ID, no driver's license. It's been happening quite a bit, so I want to stress that we want to have the safety first for Beaverton residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kami. Yeah, I think we all feel it when these things happen in our community. And so I really appreciate all of your comments to remind our communities make the best choices, make safe choices, because it affects people, their health, their well-being, their lives. So thank you for those comments. Seeing no further names in the chat, Jenny, are there any staff items tonight?
Just really quickly, Council President, reminder to the community that we have 2 community briefings that are coming up with respect to the budget. One this Thursday, April 20th at 6 p.m. That will be a virtual meeting so that you can catch the link on the city's website homepage. The other one is next Monday on April 24th. That is an in-person meeting that'll be in the chambers, and that begins at 6 p.m. as well.
Thank you, City Manager. I hope many of our community members will go and make their voices heard. Okay, so now we're at the point, and City Recorder, I hope I didn't make this too challenging on you where I moved an agenda item. So I'd like us to go ahead and take action item 23083 now, and then we'll move on with the rest of the agenda. So that is the agenda bill regarding our council goals and priorities. So City Manager, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Council President. If I could get the slide deck up, I just have a brief orientation I wanted to provide the council, and then we can get straight into discussion. So I'll wait a moment to have that up. All right, if we could move to the next slide. Tonight, I'll be going over the council's strategic priorities for the next 2 fiscal years. In the presentation outline, I would like to talk a little bit about the process of priority setting, and as it relates to the budget, your goals that you established in the prior year, and then the proposed 2-year priorities and really what those key focus areas will be, as well as a summary of that implementation on the work plan, and then give you a chance to address some council policy questions, and then what the action items are being asked of you this evening. So with the next slide, I think I'm going to start with the goals. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. So these goals are 8 goals that the council had established a year ago, and they really are critical. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you and with the community is that these strategic goals really help guide what gets focused on over the next 2 years, and they really serve as a rudder, not only for council policy decisions, but also organizationally, and as we develop operational procedures and internal processes, and these have been really outstanding to help guide our internal work. And so you'll see many of these goals illustrated with the priorities that you have designated for the next 2 years. Next slide. So in February of this year, the council met. They retained SSW Consulting to help do a retreat-like setting so that you could identify what your priorities would be. Included in your packet this evening is a summary of those activities. It's the consultant final report, so you can refer to there. It's a nice summary document to tell you kind of all of the activities that you went through and what those outcomes were. And these priorities, more importantly, inform the development of the budget for next year. And those items will be discussed in more detail at your budget committee meetings. Those are scheduled for May 9th and May 23rd. Next slide. So the council ultimately identified 6 focus areas. They are service and stability, financial recovery, safe streets, a tree canopy, housing, and multicultural center. And what I'll do is I'll go through these at a very, very high level just to give the community orientation on what these mean for the next 2 years. So next slide. So the council was very intentional about what they wanted to focus on, given that we have very limited resources this next fiscal year and the years after. And so we limited the list to about 6 items. And the first one is multicultural center. And the council really went back and forth and didn't have a very specific direction on this. But what was clear at the meeting was that the first step would be a needs assessment survey to understand exactly what problem we're trying to solve in terms of whether we need a brick and mortar facility or whether we need programmatic partnerships. And so we want to delve into that work and test that assumption out. I know that this might be a topic of conversation later with council, so I'll hold additional comments and we'll get into discussion later. Service and stability really is around good governance. The council made it very clear that they wanted the rules of procedure updated and codifying council roles and responsibilities really to reflect the new form of government that we're in, which is the council manager form of government. And another important piece that was raised by council is really having an opportunity to look at our goals around boards and commissions, to look at role clarity and how we can identify efficiencies with the commissions and how we use them. Fiscal recovery was the third item, and I will be bringing to you over the next year a short and a long-term strategy that identifies an action plan for implementation on strategies to help address our long-term fiscal needs. As short-term needs will be identified in this year's budget, as well as a communications plan of how that's going to roll out and how we're going to have community engagement on that. I will also include in that budget principles that guide decisions around our fiscal sustainability efforts. Safe streets was another item. That includes updating our traffic calming program and procedures and Beaverton transportation related codes to reflect city policies and state legislative mandates. We're going to continue the loop planning and the transportation system plan work as well. That will all be based on available resources. The fifth item was housing. And that involves completing the city's permanent permanent homeless shelter and the implementation of the Metro Affordable Housing Bond Program. We still have bond proceeds that we're implementing. We have a number of affordable housing projects that are underway, and we want to get those completed over the next 2 years. And then the last is tree canopy. And tree canopy involves seeking interim solutions so that we can preserve and protect the tree canopy that we have right now. And then we want to also start the planning process of how we can implement a longer term strategy to complete a more comprehensive view from a citywide perspective and update the city tree code. And as you know, that takes a lot of resource. We will not probably be updating the code in this 2-year planning cycle, but we will start looking at ways of how we can get there in the next 2. And then the next slide, please. So some policy questions for you to think about is, do you have questions about the consultant's workshop report? Are there any changes that you want to make to the priorities for the next 2 years? Things that you may want to pull off, things that you want more refined? And then if you have any questions about the actual work plan itself and the summary. And so if we can just go to the next slide, the most important things that I ask of you this evening is to provide direction, of course, on the proposed priority focus areas, and then consider and adopt, if it's appropriate this evening, your 2-year priorities. I would like to just say that if the council wants to pivot and do something very different or add to this, I would encourage the council to discuss it, but perhaps we punt this to the next meeting so we can have the entire council present to make those decisions, since you were very intentional about this work and you narrowed the focus because you knew about staff resources and budgetary constraints. So I would just add that for consideration as you talk about this item tonight. That concludes my report.
Thank you, City Manager. So we will first go into discussion, answer the questions, and then if we get to the point of a motion, then we would also debate the motion. So we'll start off with Mayor Beatty.
It's kind of nice to be the participant, not the mayor facilitator. So thank you for that, Council President. I know it's a little unique, but for our community knows I just gave birth to our daughter 2 weeks ago. And so it was important for me to be here to vote for our council priorities. This is our work plan for 2 years. And this is, we spent a day and a half together and had a lot of robust conversation, a lot of having to choose and having a lot of our competing interests together. I think this list in its totality is very reflective of our 2 days together. There's a lot I want on this list too. And I think we all agreed that this is the year that we stabilize our government. This is the year we kind of pull ourselves out of our $10 million budget shortfall. This is the time that we put in the hard work together to make sure that our government is structured in a way that we could be successful for the next 2, 5, and 10 years. And I think a year to slow down to go fast is where we're at. And so I thank you, City Manager, for this list. I think we all get a little bit of something we want. We have a tree policy in here. We have some stuff around transportation. We have a great next step for the multicultural center. We have it on the timeline to get something done, which is what the council's been asking for quite a long time. So I'm happy to support the list. I don't feel like changes need to be made. I think our 2 days of conversation landed us in the perfect position. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Tivnon.
Yeah, I just want to share some feedback I got from a member of the community who looked at the list and thought, this all looks great, but trees, really? Is that? It's just, and I listened to them share their thoughts on it. They didn't see it as being an urgent issue, but then in light of Cooper Mountain and the conversations of expanding the urban growth boundary and the infill development that's happening within the city, and the fact that we don't have anything to govern what it looks like for tree preservation or canopy, I think put a point on how urgent this is to do now, given what we have out in front of us over the next 10 years, probably of pretty active development and beyond. So the only concern that I have around this one is if there's any way to get Washington County on board with something to protect the tree canopy in the areas that are currently unincorporated but are expected to become incorporated at some point. And I know we've glanced off of that, but that is one item that I hope would be a priority within the priority to get clarity on that. And then the rest of the list, it feels these are all they're interrelated in that they all like check boxes on that list. Not every box for everything. It does feel different than in years past in terms of the things that have made it on the list. And I do think that given the next couple of years that we have in front of us, this is a list that is achievable, while also really focusing our time and efforts on that financial recovery piece.
Thank you, Councillor Tivnon. City Manager, I want to make sure you have a chance to respond like intermittently if you need to. So I don't know if there's anything from what the Mayor or Councillor Tivnon said that you want to respond to.
No, I'm good, but thank you.
Okay, Councillor Husson.
Yeah, all right. I have 2 comments, but before I go, I'm just really going to quick say hi, Zoya. Thank you. The first comment that I have is maybe just understanding a little bit more from you, Jenny, on like what you mean by a needs analysis. I know that there was a robust discussion. I do want to make sure that like the counselors that feel really close to this feel like they can be centered in like kind of guiding and directing. And so part of me is like, is that a subcommittee or like, are we on the right track? So maybe if you could just like help me understand that a little bit more, and then I'll make my second comment.
Sure. So the council you're right, had a robust conversation on this, and they agreed that they wanted to understand better what problem was trying to be solved. And it was unclear what the long-term goal was, whether it was a brick and mortar building, whether it was partnerships and programming. And one of the narrow points that we could focus on was a needs assessment and doing a comprehensive, statistically valid kind of assessment to learn what exactly we're trying to do to inform. There would be a stakeholder engagement process as a part of that ramp up to that needs assessment. But those were the very specific directions from the council that everyone agreed as a first initial step. And we understood that once we get some of that data, that would probably be more work, but it was very unclear from my perspective of what it was. And so this was the agreed upon first step, one of many, of course. So that was my understanding. I'll be curious if that was something very different. So please let me know.
Yeah, no, I do understand that there was a dialogue. I think my comment is just that, again, like, I don't think it's not a non-need. It's just about us convening people and helping bring people together. And so I don't want to get stuck in a needs analysis that will slow us down. And so I'll put this out to the council, like, could we add something like having some sort of having a subcommittee of a couple of us that are helping ensure that this like kind of stays front and center without, again, being really thoughtful of staff. I know that we've got a lot and this is a difficult year. So that's maybe just my one ask to make sure that we're kind of moving this forward, because I think that there's a couple of us that really have just a very unique connection to communities of color and the lived experiences of communities of color. And if we can't get that subcommittee concept going, at minimum, it's really important that we're centering those people with those experiences. Some of y'all know that I'm actually not in town because I'm helping with a family friend. That's just something that we tend to do quite a bit. And so really centering people that understand what it means to be in that sort of community, I think is super critical to me. So let that sit. Y'all can comment or respond how you see fit. Again, I do want to see at minimum some sort of a subcommittee and or centering of voices that really would understand the importance of this center. The second comment that I want to make was, you know, and it could probably show up somewhere here, Jenny, but so help me out. One of the comments that I had made is really talking about institutionalizing like racial and climate equity in our intergovernmental agreements and MOUs, so matter of understanding. So any partnerships and relationships that we have, really ensuring that organizations that we're working with in any of our agreements, that we're really prioritizing with that really equity first lens. And so I was kind of looking at the PDF and I was like, is this an item that we would add in priority 2 under organizational stability? Is it a budget principle under financial recovery that we just need to make sure is written somewhere, right? So I'd love to hear from Jenny, you maybe specifically, but I want the council to hear this. Like, it is really important to me that we lead with equity as much as possible, and that we're doing that with our intergovernmental agreements, that we're doing that with our matter of understandings. Like, I want to feel like we've worked very hard to work with organizations that drive our values. We do that today. I don't doubt that we don't, but continuing to put that in writing. And I think institutionalizing that is very, very important.
So I did receive some of that offline feedback from you. We do have principles. If the council has an appetite to reimagine those and to add language around that, I think that's fine. I do want to caution that while I think that the council has created actually a commitment statement that speaks to that through their goal development, that also does not mean that we can't make tough decisions around the budget. And we'll end up having to grapple with some of those, as you know, over the next month. So that is something that is easily done. GFOA, which is a governmental fiscal group, has great suggestions on how to incorporate that into your budget principles. It is a best practice, so that's not a problem. Councillor Husson, for us to explore if the council's interested, and those will come before you. So that'll be a great opportunity for us to make some edits and give you some language to consider around that. And then I guess if I could, before it goes back to the council on the subcommittee item, I just want to temper that we have 2 other active subcommittees that are happening right now. And if we are going to consider adding another one, we really need to get through some of those bodies of work before even entertaining, if that's the council's desire, a subcommittee. I just, frankly, that would be a lot of bandwidth. And I guess, Councillor Husson, if you could also talk a little bit about your expectation around that, because my worry would be that if there was a formation of that, there would be an expectation that we would be moving along work at a certain clip, which would actually interfere with my ability to manage other organizational priorities. So I just want to understand the expectations around that, and if we could maybe have a conversation about that a little bit later. And I understand your need to want to keep it at the forefront at the same time.
I can just respond really quick. I don't know that it's as much about meeting as it is being involved, as it is making sure that a couple of us who've got that lived experience are being able to contribute to the discussion and conversations that are happening. So I'll let people react, but I think specifically Councillor Kimmy and I have really talked a lot about this. And so I think we want to make sure that some of the things that we've heard, there are relationships that we have with people in the community who feel comfortable to come to us. And we want to make sure that just like each of you have those relationships as well, we do as well. And when it comes to this specific item, I think that we've just got something. And so I don't want to lose sight of the perspective that we would bring. A needs assessment run by a consultant that doesn't come from the community or doesn't understand within the community might not net the results that Councillor Kimmy and I could net in being in our own communities.
And I'd let you know that we would be taking that information about who's appropriate, and not just have anybody do a needs assessment that deals with this topic, but also can find avenues to make sure that the council as a body and individual councils want to weigh in on that step along the way. And there could be opportunities when we bring that information before you, for you to weigh in and to say, hey, this needs more handholding on the communication aspect because you're not going to get a good turnout. I think that's really where you're going to be very powerful in helping us. How do we create that communication and that level of involvement and safety for people to participate? So I would really support that, and also work with you on giving feedback around what direction we're going with the consultant selection so that you can feel really confident about that.
Okay, that makes me feel so much better. Thank you, Jenny. And hi, Zara.
Councilor Kimmy.
Oh yeah, I guess I second Councilor Hassan's points, and I think Jenny answered almost all my questions. So just keep us in the loop and do the process. So at least we can give a lot of feedback. That's all, and all other things look fine. Especially tree canopy, where I see the Cooper Mountain, South Cooper Mountain development really is like a barren land over there, not much tree happening. So I think it's urgent as how we are being sustainable and environmental friendly, and that the work needs to be done quickly. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kimmy. Councilor Teeter.
Thank you. So I'll just third what Councilors Hassan and Kimmy have shared. To the point where they are comfortable and willing and able to contribute and lead in a lot of these community conversations around the Multicultural Center. I would love for them to be able to take that leadership. And when they need backup, we can be there for that. For community members who are listening and looking at this list of priorities, I want to let you all know that there are only 7 priorities listed out here, but this is not all that the city's working on. You might see the housing category and see, oh, that's only focused on the shelter. But there's really so much more beyond this priority list that the city has been working on and will be working on. Just in a little bit, we're going to be talking about housing strategies for near, medium, and long term. Like, these are really meaningful steps that we're taking on housing policy that's not shown right here in this document, and that's okay. You might see tree code or safe streets, and like there's a lot of transportation work, there's a lot of land use work that we're going to be doing. I'm really happy with this list. I think it's a really good priority list, but I do want to remind people that there's a lot more that we're working on, and we're doing it in a very tight budget. So just highest commendations and recognition of staff who are doing a lot of this work.
Thank you, Councilor Teeter. I think mine is kind of a clarifying statement that if I need everyone to weigh in, we'll do it really quickly, but I wanted to ask about organizational stability. I know that the desired outcome listed is around council rules of procedure and codifying our roles, which I agree that should be on there. But I think I also considered organizational stability to actually be internal to the city. And, you know, like that, like it was like, to me, it was a sister priority to fiscal, what do we call it? Financial recovery. And I really felt like that organizational stability piece was also to help, like, let's like stop the teetering of the boat in the city, right? There's been so much change. And so that's something that I kind of felt was missing from this that I was expecting to see. So if I'm the only one who thought that, then I'm okay. But if others are feeling that way, or even, yeah, Jenny, I'm seeing some head nodding, like I would really love to include that as part of our desired outcome, is to like help empower you, Jenny, to help you, your department heads, your leads, whatever, the whole organization kind of get to that stable point, right? Like, because we acknowledged in our retreat how much, when we saw how City of Portland was going to roll out their transition plan, and it was like a 2-year plan, and we just went go. So that's something I would love to see on there. City manager, if there's anything you wanted to add in, That's kind of what I've been thinking about.
No, I think clarifying that is a great catch and something we can easily do. Part of the sustainability and the communications plan does have an organizational development component to it. I don't think it's clear, so I am happy to make that clear. That should be actually in your packet for your workshop summary, because council was clear about employee morale, making sure that we're bringing people along and supporting them and empowering them through kind of change management. So I will definitely, if you're comfortable with me just adding that language in to make it clear, I'm more than happy to do that this evening when you decide to deliberate on this item.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Hassan.
Sorry. Hi. I would like to support Councilor Hartmeyer's suggestion. I think staff wellness was a big one. I think this is great. I mean, if appropriate, I'm down to make a motion. Before I do, I want to make one comment, and that was just on the parking lot with crisis response. Totally, you know, Councilor Teeter, you like role modeled something for those people who are listening, right? Like, this is a year that we had to make hard decisions around what we can and can't do. This list was probably much bigger than what you're seeing in this agenda bill, and felt like for a lot of people who ran for office, you know, like, oh, I didn't get this, or I wanted this, or I want to see this, or I want to see more of this. And so, you know, when I think of, you know, what are I don't know who started the comment about traffic safety, but when I think of that, like, I do think that it relates to an issue of mental health and mental health crisis and folks who are really struggling and then making super poor choices as they're struggling. I see it happening quite a bit in our youth right now where they're not making the best choices. So I know that that's something that's parking lit. I'm totally, you know, I'm good with that. I do want to just take a moment and say that, you know, post-pandemic, we're going to continue to see mental health on the rise. We're seeing DUIs that are completely up in our data that we're seeing. And so I want to just take a moment and sort of think about, like, you know, maybe in 2 years what that looks like, or the things that we can do, whether it's public-private partnerships. You know, Mayor has a lot of connections. Like, you know, what are the things that we can be thinking about? Because I don't know that is going to go away. And I want to be really thoughtful of how we think about how we deal with mental health. I'm not saying that we criminalize mental health, but I do think that our current systems tend to sometimes move more towards that than actually looking at root causes. So just kind of something I want to put on everybody's radar. With that, I'll go ahead, if everyone's okay with it, and make a motion to adopt FY 23-24 Council Strategic Goals, Priorities, and Summary Work Plan, Agenda Bill 23083, with a revision and or addition based on what Councilor Hartmeyer-Prigg was sharing around
Organizational stability.
Organizational stability.
Thank you, Councilor Hassan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Hassan and seconded by Councilor Teeter. Is there any debate on the motion? Okay, seeing none, will the city recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Hartmeyer-Prigg,
Yes.
Councillor Hassan,
Yes.
Councillor Kimmy,
Yes.
Councillor Teeter,
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan,
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, City Recorder. I'm so excited that baby has made an appearance.
She has strong feelings about our council goals. And this is Kyra.
Kyra.
Hello, friends.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, baby.
I figured you guys had to be nice to me if she's here. So thank you for letting me be here for this important step we're making as a council this evening, setting our goals and priorities. I'm proud of our council. This was no easy task to get here tonight. With that, I'm going to let the council president retain the rest of the meeting, and I'm going to attend to the vice mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, wonderful. So we will now resume our regular agenda. So that means we will go back to the consent agenda. So I'm looking for a motion.
Council President, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Councilor Hassan and seconded by Councilor Kimmy. Is there any debate on the motion? Yeah, any comments? Yep.
Yeah, it's not a debate. I just have a question, Jenny. If you could just share, one of the items on the council agenda was Agenda Bill 23081, and it's around emergency sheltering and what we're doing. And I had asked Jenny this in an email, but I'd also said that I might bring it up. And so Jenny, if you could just talk to us a little bit about what that is and how we're partnering with our neighbors, that'd be really fabulous.
Yeah, I think the concern is making sure that we're bringing in the business community with respect to this. And we've had a number of touches with the immediate folks that are adjacent to the shelter site, but we're also been partnering with the Chamber of Commerce. This May, I think 9th, we're going to be having another connection with the local businesses to talk about HB 3115, which talks about the location of where camping is allowed and not allowed, and the actual implementation and how we can support them in that. Those have really championed a lot of great questions and support. So that's rolling out within the next couple of weeks. And then we also have a team that's continuing to work with the businesses and getting some of that informational awareness to them regularly. We also have people that are located actually here in TVB through eSweeps that we've also been connecting with. That has been a little bit of boots on the ground as well. So I know that our staff from our community services engagement group has gone out and spoken through our homeless team, and they continue to do that regularly. We know that this is going to evolve over time, particularly once we get some of the elements of HB 3115 in play. We want to continue to have that kind of robust connection with the business community in particular, talk with counselors offline that all have expressed some concerns. So I am working with the chamber to see if we can have some more specific touches on a more frequent basis, maybe on a quarterly basis, just on this topic alone, so that we can kind of keep that at the forefront. Because we know that this is going to continue to change once we get that shelter particularly open. So I just want to let you know that that's actually in motion and those conversations are happening.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. I just realized I was supposed to take two separate motions. So I'm going to have you clarify your motion, Councilor Husson. Do you want yours to just be for the 23080 and 23081? Okay, wonderful. So that's the motion that we are discussing right now. So Councilor Teeter.
Yes, thank you. And Jenny, this will be a quick question for you, but first a comment for the community members who are listening. This is an agreement that we're talking about that basically just gives Washington County the ability to open up an emergency shelter for houseless people in our future shelter space while it's undergoing innovations. But Jenny, I see it doesn't have a expiration term listed. Is there an expiration date associated with it, or is it open-ended until the shelter is open, just whenever there's an emergency need?
I'll ask Sia to talk to the expiration because I don't have that confirmation at my fingertips, but the idea is to extend this through the winter shelter period and to keep going. So Sia's here so she can comment on that.
Thanks.
Councilor Teeter, will you confirm for me expiration of
this?
For me your question?
Oh, expiration. So the license term, the term shall commence on February 23rd and shall continue for the duration of the temporary. Oh, there it is. Continue for the duration of the temporary certificate of occupancy.
Oh,
so
okay, good.
There it is. I just missed it until I was reading it again.
Thank you.
Okay, we clarified. Okay. Any other comments on this piece of the consent agenda? And to our public and our city recorder, I'm sorry, I messed this order up. So the motion on the table is for us to approve agenda items 23080, 23081 of the consent agenda. So city recorder, if you are ready, please take the vote.
Do we need a second? Can I second it? Okay, no.
Thank you.
Councillor Tivnon,
Yes.
Councillor Hartmeyer-Prigg,
Yes.
Councillor Kimmy,
Yes.
Councillor Teeter,
Yes.
Councillor Hassan,
Yes.
Mayor's. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, city recorder. Now I would like a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of April 19th, 2022.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? I think I need Councillor Tivnon.
Second.
Thank you. I'm sorry. This is one of those ones where only a few of us were here. So thank you all. If
No problem.
Yeah, if no debate on the motion, we will have city recorder call the roll.
Okay. Counselor Hartmeyer Prigg,
Yes.
Counselor Hassan,
Yes.
Counselor Kimmy,
Abstain.
Counselor Teeter,
Abstain.
Counselor Tivnan.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-2 with 2 people abstaining.
Thank you, city recorder. We will now move on to our proclamations. Counselor Hassan will read the first. Counselor Tivnan will read the second. I will read the third. So Counselor Hassan, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. This is a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor. Whereas child abuse and neglect are considered to be some of the most serious public health issues, with numerous studies documenting the link between abuse and neglect of children to a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral disorders with both short and long-term effects. And whereas while children of all ages, races, gender identities, socioeconomic levels, abilities, religions, backgrounds, citizenship status, and beliefs in our community are victims of child abuse and neglect, the impact of child abuse disproportionately affects children with vulnerabilities and children from communities impacted by inequity. And whereas the impact of COVID has profoundly affected reporting of child abuse and neglect in our community and nationwide, and whereas child abuse and neglect have an estimated annual direct cost of more than $428 billion nationally, according to the National Center for Disease and Control. And whereas promoting healthy, family functioning social support systems, practical support, education on nurturing and attachment and resiliency, and information about parenting and child development are all known protective factors which prevent child maltreatment. And whereas prevention has shown to be a cost-effective action that positively affects children and strengthens families. And whereas effective child abuse prevention activities succeed because of the partnerships created between child welfare professionals, educators, medical and health professionals, community organizations, businesses, law enforcement agencies, and families. And whereas all children have the right to be safe in their communities, schools, and homes. And whereas our children are our most valuable resource and will shape the future of Beaverton. And whereas Child Abuse Prevention Month provides an opportunity to show support for the numerous child abuse and neglect prevention advocates, victim service response organizations, Department of Human Services staff, law enforcement officers, and prosecutors that work every day on behalf of our children in our community. Now, therefore, Lacey Beatty, Mayor of the City of Beaverton, does hereby proclaim April 2023 as Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Thank you. Counselor Tivnan?
Yes, this is a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor. Whereas sexual violence is a serious issue that affects people of all ages, races, sexual orientations, gender identities, social economic levels, abilities, religions, backgrounds, citizenship status, beliefs, and whereas sexual violence includes physical, verbal, visual, emotional, psychological, social, spiritual, financial, and technological abuse, and can occur between intimate partners, family members, friends, acquaintances, and strangers. And whereas it is estimated that 52.2 million cisgender women, 27.6 million cisgender men, and 650,000 trans people in the United States have experienced sexual violence at some point in their life. And whereas it is estimated that 43% of sexual assaults on women and girls occurred while the victim was a minor under the age of 18, 81% of sexual assaults on women and girls occurred prior to the age of 25. And whereas sexual violence results in victims navigating long-term mental and physical health effects, including post-traumatic stress injury, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, self-injurious behavior, and more. And whereas sexual violence has a significant financial expense to our community in police and court costs, shelters and homeless services, relocation expenses, medical expenses, sick leave, absenteeism, and childcare support and services. Whereas sexual violence inhibits individuals within a community from reaching their fullest potential, and all people have the right to be safe and free from sexual violence in their communities, workplaces, homes, social and personal lives. And whereas we must all continue to support survivors, educate ourselves and others, work towards the prevention of sexual violence at its root causes, engage in meaningful dialogue, continue our coordinated community efforts, and hold offenders of sexual violence accountable. And whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month provides an opportunity to show support for the numerous sexual violence advocates, victim service organizations, crisis hotline staff, law enforcement officers, and prosecutors that work every day to offer safety, advocacy, resources, hope, and the opportunity for healing to victims in our community. Now, therefore, Lacey Beatty, Mayor of the City of Beaverton, does hereby proclaim April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Thank you, Councilor Tivnon. And a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor of the City of Beaverton. Whereas the victim rights movement began over 30 years ago with the goal of improving the experience of crime victims in the justice system, and whereas an important aspect of the victims' rights movement is the enactment of laws that protect victims, and to that end, Congress has passed the Victims of Crime Act. All states have passed victims' rights legislation, and the majority of states, including Oregon, have amended their constitutions to address victims' rights. And whereas crime impacts everyone, but often has a disproportionate impact on some members of our community, including those who face vulnerabilities or identify as being members of communities and groups impacted by inequity. And whereas the rights of crime victims are best protected when all participants in the criminal justice process and members of our community, not only victims, are appropriately educated about victims' rights and about the increased barriers created by inequity. And whereas in Washington County, a strong collaboration of governmental agencies and nonprofit organizations work tirelessly to protect and advocate for crime victims in a culturally competent manner that seeks to promote rehabilitation, offer healing, and encourage resilience for our communities and victim responders. And whereas we are determined to respond to crime and violence by helping victims find support, recovery, and justice, as well as a sense of hope for their future and the tools to rebuild their lives. And whereas National Crime Victims' Rights Week provides an opportunity to recommit to ensuring accessible, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive services are offered to all victims of crime. We are committed to showing up for victims and their families and providing them with access to the essential resources they need to heal and thrive. Now, therefore, Lacey Beatty, the Mayor of the City of Beaverton, does hereby proclaim April 23rd through 29th of 2023 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week in the City of Beaverton, and reaffirm our commitment to creating a victim service and criminal justice response that assists all victims of crime with a focus on meeting the needs of communities and groups impacted by inequity during National Crime Victims' Rights Week and throughout the year, and express our gratitude and appreciation for those community members, victim services providers, law enforcement officers, and criminal justice professionals who are committed to improving our response to all victims of crime so that they may find relevant assistance, support, justice, and peace. Thank you. Okay, our next agenda item is a public hearing on ordinance number 4840. Let me pull up my script. Thank you, City Attorney, for coming on. And so we will now start a public hearing on an ordinance vacating 2 bicycle pedestrian trail easements at 10700 Southwest Allen Boulevard. So tonight we are holding a public hearing regarding application numbers SV 2023-0001 and SV 2023-0002 to vacate 2 bicycle pedestrian trail easements at 10700 Southwest Allen Boulevard. I now call to order the public hearing. Before we move to the substance of the hearing, I will ask the City Attorney to cover some preliminary matters.
Thank you, Council President. I'll cover the procedure and the legal matters this evening. So the hearing will proceed as follows. After the preliminary legal matters, City staff will make a presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation, which will be limited to 15 minutes. Then members of the public will have an opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes each. Finally, there will be time for response or rebuttal to the public testimony by the applicant for up to 5 minutes. Council members may ask questions of staff, applicants, or anyone else who testifies. Anyone wishing to speak at this hearing should follow the instructions included on tonight's agenda. If you've joined the meeting by telephone, you enter *9 to let the city recorder know you wish to speak. Alternatively, if you join this meeting online, you can let the city recorder know you wish to speak by clicking the raised hand feature. Now to the preliminary legal matters. The applicant has the burden of proving that the applications are consistent with the Beaverton Development Code, the comprehensive plan, and any applicable Beaverton Code provision. The criteria that must be addressed in this hearing are Beaverton Development Code sections 40.03.2 and 40.75.15.1.c. Any testimony that speakers present must be directed at these criteria or some other criteria in the code or comprehensive plan which the speaker believes should apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to allow the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. In addition, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Only those who submit written comments or give oral testimony will have standing to appeal this decision. Do any council members wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Please let the record show there were no responses. Do any council members wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts? Let the record show there are no responses. Does any member of the audience wish to question the impartiality of any council member? It appears there are no responses. And finally, does anyone wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the council to hear this matter? Let the record show there are no responses. Council President, that concludes the legal matters. You can proceed with the hearing.
Thank you so much, City Attorney. We will now proceed with the staff presentation.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Lena Smith. I'm an associate planner, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Tonight's presentation will be on the Floor and Decor easement vacations. The subject site is located near the intersection of Highway 217 and Allen Boulevard. Last year, Beaverton Planning Commission approved the Phase 1 Allen redevelopment project on the northern portion of the site. This approval was for a new hotel and 2 commercial buildings with a fuel center. The approval also included the flood basin on the southeast portion of the site. In February, Beaverton Planning Commission also approved the Phase 2 Floor and Decor project in the southwest portion of the site. The approval was for a new 75,100 square foot floor and decor retail building with associated site improvements. The easements we'll be discussing tonight are located in the southern portion of the Phase 2 site. This slide zooms us into the southern portion of the Phase 2 floor and decor site. There are 2 existing City of Beaverton bicycle pedestrian trail easements that the applicant proposes to vacate. As you can see, the larger easement conflicts with the location of the floor and decor building, and the smaller easement conflicts with the location of a new stormwater planter. The easements are undeveloped, start at an existing portion of the Fano Creek Trail, run across the floor and decor site, and then terminate at Highway 217, where there is no additional trail connection. The trail just ends here. The staff researched these easements and they are not identified as existing or future trails on city maps. Therefore, even if they were vacated, the site would still be compatible with the Beaverton Comprehensive Plan and Transportation System Plan. Additionally, as part of the Phase 1 approval, the property owner dedicated a 16-foot wide public easement for a future multi-use path. This easement starts at the Fano Creek Trail, runs north-south along the eastern property line, and then connects to Allen Boulevard. Staff routed this proposal to our partner agencies like ODOT and THPRD. The agencies had no objections to vacating the existing easements and stated the new north-south pathway was the preferred alignment. Accordingly, the 2 existing easements on the Phase 2 site are no longer needed. This slide shows the project site in the larger context of the regional trail system. The existing easements are located in the southwest portion of the site and terminate at Highway 217, and the new north-south alignment will go from Fano Creek Trail up to Allen Boulevard. This slide shows a list of the partner agencies that we contacted and said they had no objections to the easement vacations. Therefore, with the dedication of the new north-south pathway, staff finds the easement vacations meet all applicable approval criteria in the Beaverton Development Code, and the site will remain compatible with the Beaverton Comprehensive Plan and Transportation System Plan. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the Floor and Decor easement vacations. This concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lena. Are there any questions from council for Lena? Councilor Teeter.
Okay, I'm here. Thanks, Lena. These easements are weird to me. I'm curious, when were they dedicated? What was their original purpose? Them ending at 217 feels unusual unless they were planned before 217 was how it is today. Do you know anything about that?
What I can say is that the easements are over 20 years old, and it is strange they terminate at Highway 217. So we can only speculate what the future alignment was going to be. But I can say that staff researched and our partners agencies researched and felt that the new north-south alignment would be the preferred pathway.
Okay. Is there any utility or other infrastructural purpose that we might have a need for these in the future that we should be aware of or thinking about?
There are existing utility easements, but they're separate and they're not tied to these ones. Yeah.
Okay. And then I have a third question. I'm not sure if now is the right time to ask it, but I'll ask it and we can figure out if it's the right time.
Sure.
Section 40.03.2.e says that the proposed transportation facility connects to the surrounding circulation systems in a safe, efficient, and direct manner. That makes sense to me. Like, we want it to go somewhere where people can actually go. There's a off-street biking and walking path just to the north of Allen, to the northeast of this intersection where it intersects with Allen, and it connects over to Western. It's kind of a forgotten or overlooked path, 10 or 12 feet wide. I'm curious, is there any talk about working with that property owner or anything the city can do to help make sure that this facility connects over to Western in a good, safe manner?
Let me share my screen. It might be helpful to show the map.
Yeah.
Northeast. Are you talking about this bike path?
So at the top of that red line, yep, and right across the street, and then right between that and Western, there's an off-street path that's maybe 15 feet off of the road or so. I don't remember. I don't know exactly. But I'm curious if there's anything that the city's planning on doing to help make sure that connects to Western. I feel like it might be outside of the scope for this specific conversation, but I think it's something that I would like us to be thinking about at the very least.
Yeah, I think for the intent of this public hearing, it would be not relevant to the like what we're discussing right now, since we're just discussing the two vacancies of these easements. But that can be something that we can talk about at another time.
Well, the part that feels relevant is it needs to connect to the surrounding systems in a safe and efficient, or safe and effective and efficient manner. And that's why I'm asking about that part across the street.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're staying on the topic of the public hearing. So I don't know if city attorney, if there's anything we need to be can we continue this question and get an answer, or do we need to hold it like this outside of the public hearing?
I agree that it's not relevant to this public hearing as to whether or not you vacate those other portions, because they're not connected to that section. We can answer that in a future time outside of the hearing.
Okay, I think I saw it as relevant because it felt like the trade-off was giving up those easements in return for the easement on the north-south connector, and that's where I was seeing how it was relevant.
So to the extent if staff feels they can answer that, then we can. There's an opportunity for the applicant to also respond as well.
Okay.
Anna.
Good evening, Anna Splatinsky, Planning Division Manager in the Community Development Department. I just, for the sake of clarity, and council may understand this already, but the easement that that goes directly north-south that will connect the Phantom Creek Trail to Allen, that has actually already been identified with the phase 1 land use approval. So they're actually, I know that we've been talking about it almost as if there's an exchange happening here, but that's not actually what the proposal is. That easement, the north-south easement, that solid red line, that's already been agreed to. This proposed vacation is actually an independent proposal. So there isn't really an exchange happening. Illustrating that new north-south alignment there is really to show that Phantom Creek Trail connectivity will exist, and to demonstrate that the easements proposed to be vacated are no longer needed. We aren't really in a swapping mode in real time, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I misunderstood, and it felt like an exchange that we were trying to arrange. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions for staff? Okay, so seeing none, we will continue with the applicant's presentation, which is limited to 15 minutes. Please give your name and your city of residence for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Rinkus. I'm a land use planner with Basinger Partners Architecture. I'm working with both Floor and Decor on these easements and worked with them on their design review, as well as I did the entitlement on phase 1. And so there's questions about the multi-use path that was just dedicated. I can speak to that as well. Let's see if sometimes I have, if I can get this to work right the first shot. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
And can you see my pointer? Because sometimes that's an issue.
We can.
Great. I'm going to keep it brief. Lena did a great job. I think a lot of people are familiar with this site. We've been working on this site for many, many years. There's been a lot of interest in it over the years. The current uses with hotel and retail, the project originally began in 2017. That was when we had our first pre-app, which included a hotel. And then we moved through the schematic design of the site. It's a very large site. There's a lot of floodplain issues. We had multiple pre-apps between 2019 and 2020. I think we had 2 or 3 additional pre-apps. There was also a separate meeting with city staff and THPRD and ODOT regarding pedestrian connectivity, the trails, and the easements. So all of these items, pedestrian connectivity was something that was always a topic of conversation in all of those pre-apps. And it was something that was important to everyone to make sure that pedestrians had good connectivity. As Lena pointed out, phase 1 included all the buildings on the north end of the site and the flood basin. That also did include the new trail, which we'll show in the next slide, that the multi-use path, which runs along the east side. And in initial meetings and in the initial pre-apps in 2017, the city, THPRD, and ODOT all weighed in, and we kind of worked together with them to figure out where the best connectivity to Phantom Creek would be. Knowing that there were the 2 easements we're looking at vacating today, that didn't go anywhere, that brought you to a highway that didn't have an established path or any time frame for a path to be constructed that they would connect to, and knowing that safe pedestrian connection to Phantom Creek was a requirement. The city requested that the path be along the east side of the property because it connects as close as possible to the existing signaled intersection at we call it the bus barn site, which is the abutting eastern property where they park the school buses. There's a signal at their entrance, their driveway entrance, and to be able to get people across Allen, the city requested that the signalized intersection, the path be as close to the signalized intersection as possible. And this slide just shows that the new Floor and Decor development that was approved back in February for their land use. Along the right-hand side, this is in cyan, that new 16-foot dedication that just was recorded in February. We are just a week or two out from getting permits for the northeastern portion here of development, which would be the hotel, and it will include construction of that multi-use path that goes from Allen all the way down to Fano. So that will be under construction soon. As part of phase 2 Floor and Decor's design review, there was an additional pathway. It is not a dedicated easement, but it is a paved ADA compliant connection that also goes through from the main drive aisle all the way down to it connects to Fano Creek as well. So there will be 2 straight pedestrian connections to get people down to the creek area. As Lena showed, the 2 easements to be vacated, this light blue and pink lines, they don't connect to Allen. They don't connect really to anything other than Fano Creek. They dead end at the highway. And this is just a visual to show you on the aerial, so everyone kind of familiarize themselves with where exactly what it looks like on the actual aerial of these easements that we're requesting vacation. They literally dead end at the highway. There's nowhere for folks to go once they get there. The red arrows kind of point to where those connections would be. So allowing those to be vacated allows the Floor and Decor development to go forward, and safe pedestrian connections are still maintained. They're actually improved with the 16-foot dedication and multi-use path that will be going in on the eastern side of the property. And like Lena mentioned, multiple jurisdictions, THPRD, ODOT, and others have weighed in that vacating these easements don't pose a problem for them or pedestrian connectivity. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions for Jennifer? Okay, seeing no questions for the applicant, we will hear if there is any testimony from the public. City Recorder, is there anyone wishing to speak?
No, Councilor Hartmeyer-Brigg, there is not.
Thank you. There appears to be no member of the public who wants to speak on this matter tonight. We will move on to comments from staff. Does the staff or the city attorney have further comments or clarification regarding this application?
No further comments. Thank you.
I have no further comments.
Thank you. Okay, does any council member have any additional questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, there's a motion on the table to approve application SV 2023-0001, SV 2023-0002, and adopt an ordinance vacating 2 bicycle pedestrian trail easements at 10700 Southwest Allen Boulevard, moved by Councilor Tivnan and seconded by Councilor Hassan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we are ready for a vote on the motion. Would the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Tivnan,
Yes.
Councilor Hartmeyer-Brigg,
Yes.
Councilor Kimmy,
Yes.
Councilor Teeter,
Yes.
Counselor Hassan.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. If you would like to appeal this decision, you must appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with LUBA's rules and any applicable provisions in the Beaverton Development Code. So thank you, Jennifer, Lena, and Megan, for helping us get through the public hearing tonight. All right, so our next agenda item is the ordinance, which is the first reading. So agenda item 23084, ordinance number to be determined, an ordinance amending the Beaverton Development Code relating to the parking policy and code project TA 2023-0001 will be held on May 2nd. It has been rescheduled for May 2nd, I'm sorry, and will be held on July 18th, 2023 during the regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Our next agenda item is a work session around the Housing Beaverton project. So I'm going to hand it over to staff. So please make sure as you come on to introduce yourselves, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. One moment while I share my screen. Okay. So good evening, council members. My name is Jenna Hughes. I'm an associate planner in the Community Development Department. I am joined tonight by Javier Mena, Affordable Housing Manager, and Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager, as well as members of our consultant team, Matt Hasty and Kate Rogers from MIG, and Becky Hewitt from Echo Northwest. We are here to give you all an update on the Housing Beaverton project and get your feedback on the housing needs analysis and housing production strategy reports, which are included in your packet. The questions we'll be discussing tonight are: 1, do you have any questions or comments regarding the near-term and medium-term strategies selected in the housing production strategy? Do you have any other comments or questions about the housing production strategy document? And do you have any questions or comments regarding the housing needs analysis? So to give a brief overview, the Housing Beaverton project has 2 major parts, which are also both required by state law. In phase 1, the housing needs analysis, we determined what the current and future housing needs are for Beaverton residents. Phase 2, the housing production strategy determines what steps the city will take to make sure we provide needed housing. We are almost at the end of this phase and will soon be finalizing these reports later this spring. We worked with our consultants to conduct the housing needs analysis, which found that by 2042, Beaverton's population will grow by 19,000 more people, and we'll need over 9,000 more homes in order to meet this need. While everyone needs housing, certain groups have an especially hard time accessing the housing they need, such as low-income households, households of color, seniors, people with disabilities, and people experiencing homelessness. So we need to make sure we have housing strategies that meet the specific needs of these groups. More details are also included in the full housing needs analysis report in your packet. So the last time I came before you all, we shared the list of draft potential housing strategies. Consultants and staff engaged with developers and housing producers to discuss these draft strategies. In general, housing producers are in favor of increasing development flexibility and capacity, especially in multi-dwelling and mixed-use districts. They are also in favor of permit-ready plan sets for middle housing and ADUs, incentives as opposed to requirements. We're also seen as something that could be helpful in producing more accessible or family-size housing. Middle housing and multi-dwelling developers have advocated for tax exemption programs. And while some housing producers thought CET or construction excise tax could deter some developers, affordable housing providers were very much in support of this strategy.
So based on council and community feedback, we've revised the list of housing strategies and reorganized them into the 5 main categories listed here. We have also assigned estimated timeframes for implementation. These are some strategies included in the next 5 years. This is not an all-inclusive list. So please refer to the attachment in your packet for more details. And also further analysis and resources are needed to determine whether these are actually implemented in this time frame. That being said, some items that are currently in the queue include under near-term strategies, removing parking minimums, which will be done through the Parking Policy and Code Project, promoting and requiring a mix of housing types in the Cooper Mountain area, increasing engagement and relationship building with community groups, and establishing a construction excise tax to help fund affordable housing. Under medium-term strategies, we have increasing development flexibility for market rate and affordable housing, updating our code to allow for single-room occupancy housing and other low-cost housing, and promoting accessible and multi-generational housing, establishing a housing development fund for affordable housing, and exploring a tax exemption program to incentivize more multi-unit housing. And we also have partnering with home builders such as Habitat to create more affordable homeownership housing, and analyzing the impact of short-term rentals and possibly creating regulations around those. So I will let our consultants take over these next few slides.
Good evening, Council. This is Becky Hewitt with Echo Northwest. We are part of the consultant team that is supporting the city on this effort, and the city identified a couple of strategies that they requested that we look at in a little bit more detail to help inform the strategies and inform Council's discussions. One of them was the construction excise tax that Jenna mentioned. So this is applied on new development at the time of building permit. It's a percentage of the permit value of the development. There are some rules in state statute around how much you can charge for residential development, and then how the proceeds from the construction excise tax have to be used. But overall, it's generally intended to fund local affordable housing programs. And within that state statute, the city has a fair amount of flexibility to prioritize what type of local affordable housing programs are a priority and how those resources be allocated. We used some past permit data from the city to say if the city had had a construction excise tax in place over the past several years, going back to 2013, what would we expect to see? What would the city have collected looking at different rates? So those percentages you see in the chart are like a fraction of a percentage of the permit value of the development. So we looked at a couple of different rates that the city could potentially charge overall. Given the amount of development that's been occurring in the city of Beaverton, a construction excise tax would have relatively high revenue potential. So on the low end, maybe $500,000 per year if applied to both residential and commercial industrial development. On the kind of higher end of what we looked at, over $1 million, maybe 1.8 something on average. Because it fluctuates with development, this is, it would vary from year to year. So relatively high revenue potential. It does incrementally increase the cost of development. Obviously, the higher the rate, the greater the impact to the cost of development. On the residential side, for single family, it's going to tend to affect larger homes more. And because it scales with value. So unlike a fixed per unit system development charge for some of your infrastructure impacts. A CET does scale based on unit size, and that means that it doesn't impact your lowest cost housing, disproportionately. It just has sort of a scaled impact across the board. There are other jurisdictions in the Portland region, including Portland, Milwaukee, and Tigard, and then others outside of the region that have implemented construction excise tax. I'm not aware that any of them have seen major drop-offs to their development or permitting activity as a result, but I don't have access to data that shows, whether there has been a small decrease or any shift. And then I understand that this is going to be brought to council as part of your fiscal sustainability strategy, also for further deliberation. Next slide. Another one that staff asked us to look at is the multiple unit property tax exemption. So this is a tax abatement. It's a little bit similar to the vertical housing development zones that you already have, but it does not require ground floor retail. It can apply to any multi-unit development, 2 units or more. A city can set what the minimum threshold is. And the city can, it's a pretty flexible program where the city can choose to prioritize based on certain features of housing that are needed, or to apply it to mixed income housing. There are several ways the city could implement it. So we looked at whether it could provide a viable incentive for mixed income development, and our initial assessment is that it could if all of the taxing districts were to opt in. They don't all have to opt in, but if you got sufficient support from overlapping taxing districts that it would provide a substantial tax abatement, then it could also provide potentially a viable incentive for market rate developers to include below market units in their development. But that affordability, in order to make it viable, would only last for as long as the tax abatement lasts, which is a period of 10 years. So during that 10 years, the taxes would be exempt on the full value of the building, not just the value of the affordable units. And then at the end of the 10 years, the full value of the property would become taxable again. Next slide. Finally, we looked for accessory dwelling units. We looked at what some of the non-regulatory barriers are and whether there are actions the city could take to help overcome those. Overall, we see ADUs as being able to serve a variety of housing needs, but they also sometimes are used as short-term rentals as an income stream for the homeowner. And some of the non-regulatory barriers that can come up are just the magnitude of the upfront cost, the lack of access to financing to help put in that upfront investment, especially for lower and moderate income homeowners. Access to that much money at one time can be difficult. And then also just the permitting and design process. If you're talking about something that individual homeowners are going through, then the simpler, the better, because people are not necessarily professional developers or professionals in any sort of housing production. And so things like pre-approved plans can both simplify things and reduce costs. There's also some jurisdictions choose to not collect system development charges on ADUs, but in Beaverton, you're mostly collecting them for other service providers. There are not a lot of cases in which the city is collecting its own SDCs for accessory dwelling units, so there's not a lot you can control there. And then there are some, more so at a regional or state level, but there are some places that are providing grants or low interest loans to homeowners, mostly low and moderate income homeowners, to help them make that upfront investment and then be able to both have an income stream that helps them stay in their home and provide additional housing for someone else. And that's all of my slides. I'll turn it back over to the rest of the team.
Great, thanks, Becky. Just in terms of next steps for this project, we will be finalizing both the housing needs analysis and housing production strategy reports, and we'll be sharing this with the state in May. We'll then have public hearings to adopt the housing needs analysis tentatively in June for Planning Commission and August for Council. And since the housing production strategy is not a land use decision, that will be adopted directly by City Council by resolution, tentatively in the September timeframe. So that concludes our presentation. The questions again for discussion are, do you have any questions or comments regarding the near term and medium term housing strategies? Do you have any other comments or questions about the housing production strategy document or the housing needs analysis document? Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Becky, for the presentation. We'll start things off with Councilor Tignon.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly for clarification for Ms. Becky Hewitt, who I used to actually work with at Echo Northwest. It's nice to hear your voice. You had mentioned that other cities in the region have adopted the construction excise tax, but the information isn't readily available on if that has had any effect on new development. Is that information that we could track down, or Beaverton City staff could somehow get their hands on? I'd love to see how it's playing out in other cities that have already gone down that path.
So it would be possible to request permitting. So there's two ways you could handle that. One would be to try to get permitting data and look at sort of in a more quantitative way. Do you see a change in permitting activity after construction excise tax was implemented? But given the number of other variables affecting how much development happens in any given year, you would want to do that in a relatively nuanced way to say, did it change relative to Beaverton, for example? Did they see a different, up and down trend than Beaverton did over the same period of time, for example? So it's a little bit more of a complicated analysis to answer it really quantitatively. The other option would be just to reach out to staff that work in those places and ask in a more qualitative way if they have observed any differences in permitting. We did pull some numbers together of sort of what the cost would be for a typical home, and we're talking about, on the low end, $1,000 on a home or less. So the work we've done on system development charges suggests that that's probably not enough to move the needle for most residential development. Where you might get worried is on a higher rate on bigger projects, like a bigger commercial or industrial development with a higher rate could potentially see a bigger impact. And that would be one where talking to staff in other cities, they might be able to get a sense of whether in pre-app conversations, did that come up? Was it a concern in a way that you might not be able to pick up in permitting data?
Got it.
Just to follow up on Councilor Tignon, I did have a conversation with Tiger staff, and anecdotally, they implemented the CET right before the pandemic happened. But since it's recovered, and from what they are telling me, and they shared their numbers with us, they don't see any major impact. They have not seen any major impact on development because of the implementation of the CET.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And I know the data from the last several years is different because of the pandemic. Yeah, I think my only comment is just I'd spoken to a home builder who operates on the East Coast, and it's different all over the country. Different municipalities do different things. Some are very bullish on development and removing roadblocks, and others are much more prescriptive with how they're trying to get more housing built. And basically I said, do you have concern about these additional fees or taxes imposed? And he goes, well, it's going to get passed to the buyer. It's like our biggest concern is financing, and if it'll affect our ability to get financing. that gave me a little bit of pause, but I also understand that there's, it's not just the amount of housing we're trying to encourage, it's the types of housing. So anyway, I appreciate you answering my question. And yeah, if there is any way to get, even if it's qualitative, feedback on if this has paused anything for anybody, even if it's only in the short term, what's the pros and cons of it?
I would also just say in response to that we didn't look at construction excise tax specifically, but we recently completed a statewide study on the impact of system development charges on housing, both affordability and production. And our work on system development charges suggested that there is some impact at the margins, but the biggest concern is when you have a high rate on something that is got a thin margin and is a lower cost housing type to begin with. And because the construction excise tax does scale, it is less of a concern on that front. So I would say relative to increasing system development charges by a similar amount, I think it is probably less of an impact to development than that. And like I said, I would be a little bit more concerned about larger commercial and industrial developments because it could end up being a large number for a larger development potentially.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And if it's possible to get our hands on that report, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Councillor Teeter.
Thank you. I've got a few points that I would like to bring up. The first is for some of the near-term strategies. There are a few that I don't see listed that I think are pretty easy if we've got the political will to do them, and maybe that requires some more conversations about it. First, parking minimums. We're talking about this very soon. Sightline Institute just published a new research article. It said 60 to 70% of new homes in Buffalo and Seattle would have been illegal to build before they eliminated parking minimums. So I think we're taking a great step there soon. But also the report talked about floor area ratios and height limit eliminations. I'm very supportive of getting rid of like floor area ratios and mixed use districts, and height limitations. I'm not a fan of either. So I would love to have a conversation, see where other councilors feel about those. I'm also very interested in the permit ready plan sets for middle housing and ADUs. I think ADUs feels like it might be a little bit of an easier step to actually do. I know Bend just posted new plan sets for ADUs in their city. I'm curious, is this something that like we can take something that from a city with a very similar, if maybe it's not Bend, but from a city with a similar code and just say they've approved these ADUs, like let's bring that design to Beaverton and then just edit a little bit. Like, is it an easy process or is it time consuming? What's that look like? Yep, Matt.
Yep, I can take a quick shot at that. It's not, you can't just take something from another city and sort of drop it into Beaverton without making some changes, because you need to make sure that those design sets correspond to or are consistent with all of your development code standards, heights, setbacks, landscaping requirements, those types of things. So if you try to do that, you'd need to take a close look at those to make sure that there was consistency between your requirements and the requirements in the other jurisdiction. And you also would potentially want to get an architect involved in that. You might find somebody who would be interested in doing that at a low cost because they'd get to potentially get some business from the people using those pre-approved design plans. So I think it's not a hugely expensive undertaking, but it's not a just can't do it just like that. So that's what I would say about that. Thank you. And there's not a ton of places that have done it, but a few, and Ben's one that you mentioned, and there's some other ones out there.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Next comment, Councillor Tivnan brought this up a little bit with the construction excise taxes. Generally, at least from what I know right now, I'm supportive of us looking into that more, especially if it's on certain uses or types of development. Like I would rather see them on uses that either take up more land for fewer housing, so like bigger single family huts with very few residents who actually be using it, or if it's commercial uses, maybe it's on uses that are more polluting for the environment or carry a higher burden on the rest of the community. Like those sorts of considerations, like how can we use construction excise taxes to not only support affordable housing, but also shift the market a little bit here locally to get more of the development we want and maybe less that's a little bit more costly for us. That's just some of my thoughts there. And then my final comment is about the goal of reviewing bike parking minimums or bike parking requirements. I know that a lot of developers have said that this can be challenging for them. And I think that there are several reasons why it's important for us to not reduce bike parking, or why it might not be being used. Like maybe it's poor quality racks, maybe it's unsafe locations or inconvenient locations, maybe the streets aren't safe, maybe this neighborhood or the business or the property doesn't connect to anything that people would actually want to ride to. And then I think also, at least on planning commission, it felt like a lot of times development proposals would come to us and we'd say, where's the bike parking? And they'd say, oh, we haven't figured it out yet. So it felt like it was one of these things that people put off to the very end, and then that would be why it was your function to point out where it goes. I'm not a fan of, let me rephrase this. I like designing for the city that we want to have, rather than just kind of being stuck with where we are right now. And I kind of bring that framework into a lot of the ideas and ways that I look at things right here. So thank you for the information in the report. I really appreciated it. There were a lot of really great figures later on in the report that I think we should look at more, like the figure 5.3, the gentrification map. It was on page 97 of the PDF, 91 of the actual document, but the map of Beaverton showing the status of gentrification was really interesting and alarming. I think we deserve to give it some more attention. Thank you. That's it.
All right, Councillor Husson.
Thanks for the presentation. I did like one of the things Councillor Teeter mentioned. It was the construction excise tax, like trying to be more strategic about where and when we apply that. So I wanted to take a moment and just was thinking about it and like processing it, and I really appreciated it. I really I've seen you all do this work and engage with the community, so I'm really happy to see it. I think this is really great and it's moving 100% in the right direction. I have a question, and I know I brought this up a while ago, and I'm not sure if this is the staff that I brought it up with, but you know, my sister, when she lived on the East Coast, you know, they lived in a multi-generational household with 3 kitchens. And so it was a single family, well, I don't know, it was like a single family home, but you know, the basement was a full apartment with a full kitchen. The main floor had a full kitchen, a full primary bedroom, a full primary bathroom. And then the top floor, sorry, it was 2 kitchens, had a full primary bedroom and a full bathroom. Like, I mean, it was like the whole shebang, right? And so I remember in my one-on-ones, I talked to some of you all about it, and it was like, it was a code issue or it was some challenge. Does anyone remember like what I'm talking about? What I'm specifically trying to ask, I guess, is what stops us from having, I think one of our barriers with multi-generational housing is like, we're not, like, you can't have 2 kitchens in a house, right? And yet you can have an apartment complex with a bunch of kitchens. So can someone just help me understand that? Because as a, you know, South Asian daughter of immigrant parents, like if my parents could have a second kitchen in my house, like we live together, but that's just not something that's on the table in our current codes and housing production needs. Ooh, this is a hard question. Everyone's giving me a look.
I'm going to pipe in at the risk of being wrong and say, I don't know if there's anything, at least in your development code, that would prevent somebody from putting a second kitchen in a home. Certainly if you had an accessory dwelling unit within that home in the basement, you could have a kitchen in there. That seems like more of a building code issue to me than a development code issue. And even then, I'm not exactly sure about that. So I see Kate has her hand up, and she has a much better, she has much more knowledge about your code than I do. It's always good when she bails me out. But we'll see what she has to say. But I don't know if that's necessarily at least a development code issue.
This is Kate. I actually don't know the specific answer about Beaverton's development code, but I do know that other jurisdictions kind of treat this issue differently. So some jurisdictions I know of say if, you know, a dwelling unit can only have one full kitchen. And I think their concern is really that someone would kind of sneakily have an accessory dwelling unit that, you know, they're renting out, but is not, you know, officially permitted as an ADU. And they wanted to avoid that. But I also know of other jurisdictions that say you can have as many kitchens as you want. We're not regulating that because of the, you know, the sort of multi-generational living options that does provide, and, you know, guest homes and things like that. So we could take a closer look at Beaverton's code to see what the barriers are. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier, I would say.
Thanks, Kate. Brian, you want to chime in?
Sure. This is mostly a building/fire code issue. The short answer is it's not necessarily how many kitchens you have, but how the walls and unit are arranged to prevent fire danger of people sleeping or occupying that household or those households. So we've actually, I remember, prepared a response to that very question in the past, and we'll try to dig that up and see if we can share that information with Jenny and see if we want to send that to the council.
Yeah, Brian, I do. And it was, I think it was you. And I was like, I don't see Brian. I'd love to understand that a little bit more. I do think that that's a pretty big, you know, I don't know if this is related to housing production, but it's a barrier, right? Like when you think of people that are willing to live in a multiple unit space, if we can't figure out a way to have separate living quarters, but when you say fire code, like a part of me just kind of like dies a little inside, because you have apartments that have, right, like we are building several kitchens within a small space. And so I guess I'd like to understand that some more. I think the last comment that I'll make is that, you know, I was, you know, born and raised in an immigrant household where like aunts, uncles, grandparents lived with me, and some of you all have heard this, right? And so it was like at any given time we had, you know, 8 to 15 people living in our house. I'm not sure if that violated some code, but it was a bit of a norm. And that was because not only was there space, but we were comfortable living with one another. And I do believe that, you know, when I look at the pandemic, when I look at the isolation that people have gone through, when I look at the mental health, you know, when I look at what's happening in this country, I do think there's this lack of like community. And so like, when I think of like the single room occupancy, like of those kinds of concepts and ideas, I really do think that there's this, desire that we all have for like belonging and connection with people, and us going more into that direction of like, we can all live together and we can all live together in harmony. I know that it sounds almost kind of dreamy and philosophical, but I do believe that we can continue to build that desire if developers are interested. It's something that often weighs heavily on my mind, this idea that, you know, multiple families could live in that's just very common for us. And so when we talk about multi-generational living, continuing to center families, which I know you all do with the partnerships that you have, that can help us understand that, like, yeah, like, I don't know that I'd call it an ADU, but they'd live with us, you know what I mean? And then there's like a little stove here on the side, because it's just not like, we don't think of it like that. So I see Jana smiling, so I think she kind of gets it. So I'll kind of stop with my words, but just something for y'all to think about. I super appreciate this presentation, and it was very thorough, and I think we're on the right track. So thanks.
Councilor Kimi.
Yeah, maybe somebody can explain what single room occupancy really means to me. Anybody?
I can.
What do you mean single room occupancy allowed?
This is like where you could actually like rent a room in your house. I think I asked this too because I was curious. Like you could rent like or even like guest houses, right? Where it's kind of like you rent a room. Okay, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, this is generally multi-unit buildings where people can rent a room, but they share either cooking or bathroom facilities. So some of these examples would be folks with experiencing really low incomes that just want a place to stay, and all the way to more like student housing, where or folks who are just starting out. It's their first rental place, and it's often seen in like bigger cities and like really expensive markets where people are needing housing.
So we didn't allow that before?
We allow it in some zones, in certain locations, but not. The idea for the project would be just to take a look at the whole code and perhaps expand where they're allowed.
I thought it was allowed. I can think of many people who already rent their bedrooms out. So
yeah, and folks can do that inside their own houses as well. That's also a possibility.
Okay, but we don't have any code, anything that they have to register, nothing like that. You can just do it, rent one of your rooms, no problem.
I believe that's fine. I don't know about registering and whether they have to go through any special process or pay any special fees, but we can look into that.
Well, somebody has their hand raised.
Yes, Kate, do you want to add?
That's me. Yeah, this is Kate. Thanks. And just to add that with single room occupancy housing, I think a lot of development codes don't really have a neat category for it because it doesn't exactly fit sort of the typical dwelling unit where you have all of your facilities within the dwelling unit. So for one, it can be a sort of definitions issue. And then it's also, you're renting a room, but you might share a kitchen with other people. So it doesn't have the same kind of impacts that a single dwelling unit would typically have in terms of impacts to the sewer system, and you might want to regulate the density of that type of housing differently than you do for typical sort of multi-dwelling housing. So that was one of the strategies that is suggested in the report is maybe calculating the density for SROs differently than you do for typical housing.
Okay, another question to follow up is that do we allow bedrooms with locked doors? Because I think like Washington County, when they rent them out, they don't allow any rooms with locked doors or not. Do we have any code for that? When we rent out the rooms, let's say you could have a lock or you cannot have a lock. We have no code.
Councilor Kimmy, are you thinking in like a shelter, like a congregate shelter type?
No, like even you rent out your rooms from rooms in your own home. I think I heard about a code where you cannot have a lock or you can have a lock. Does the city ever have a code for that? Like somebody can lock themselves in, or you can go in or out. Reason I'm asking, I used to have a rental property, and then the renter put a lock, but they were part of Section 8, and Section 8 does not allow that. And they were complaining to me about it. I don't have it anymore. I'm just saying, do the city have any code in regards to that?
Councilor, I don't know the answer to that question. That'll be another one I'll just have to check on.
Okay, that's not important. The reason I'm asking this kind of question is regards to code, where I know we are building lots of rental units, but those big developers come in and they supply our housing market with rental apartments and rental units, but then our residents will forever be a renter. And that's my concern, where I know some kind of state law requires was condo builders to have like 7 to 10 year warranty on the condo, so they're not able to build it. But then we have our residents of Beaverton who's going to be not able to buy into a smaller unit and smaller housing. So then they'll be forever be renting, and we are making big corporations richer, more money. And so I was just wondering, is there any way we can go around that? And my thought was, in Korea, we have something called office tel, where you use your studio or 1-bedroom units like a condo, but it's also an office, where we are trying to attract these young entrepreneurs to come in, young people to come in, build their business, but they can also use it as an office where they're living. And do we allow that? And if it is, maybe we can go around the law or somehow to attract the builders to build something like that. I'm trying to come up with some units where we can supply and people can buy, young single person can buy, because we have almost no housing available for low income and single person. So, and all the new houses that's going in are either rentals or like big houses. So what's our strategy in regards to that? That's what I want to know, because it's not mentioned here.
So I'm just going to note briefly that quite a few of the strategies that are identified in the housing production strategy report really are aimed at increasing the production and supply of housing that's affordable to people with lower incomes, both rental housing and ownership housing. And there are also a number of strategies that are described in the document that are aimed at increasing opportunities for home ownership, particularly among groups or folks who have traditionally had lower rates of home ownership. So I just want to sort of note generally that that's a pretty strong emphasis in the housing production strategy report. I think the questions you asked around kind of spaces that allow for both an office and a living or residential use. I mean, I think some of that you could do now. And when you think about it in terms of people working from home, they are essentially using those spaces as homes and offices. The city also allows in some places for what are called live-work units, where you have a business and a dwelling in essentially the same place, the same unit. So that's allowed. And I think beyond that, we kind of have to take a look at some of the things you suggested in a little more detail to answer some of those questions. But I think generally a lot of emphasis on meeting the types of needs that you described. So appreciate the comments. And I don't know if others have anything to add, Jenna or Brian or Kate.
I mean, thank you for the answer. I just want a quick follow-up, and then I'm just not, and that's going to be it. Is that when I read it, we pretty much don't have any housing, somebody who makes less than $100,000 that they could buy right now. So what is our strategy? If you can come back to me later one-on-ones or whatever, what is the strategy to somebody who makes less than $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year that they could buy? And we say we have so much emphasis, but we're emphasizing without any strategy. So I'd like to see more detailed strategy to attract those builders and those young people or couple who makes $60,000 to $70,000 can buy a home or condo. So, and that's my comments. You can answer, or you can get back to me in one-on-ones. Thank you.
Kate?
Yeah, this is Kate. I'll just point out a couple strategies that do kind of work towards what you're talking about, which is more affordable home ownership opportunities. One is there are pretty significant challenges to condo development, and we talk about this in the report. And there's a range of challenges, market driven and financing and things like that. But one of the biggest ones is construction defect liability insurance requirements and laws, and Oregon has very stricter requirements than other states. And Echo Northwest is really kind of the expert on this, so Becky can feel free to chime in. But one of the strategies is the city just advocating for statewide legislative action to address that, and that's really kind of a longer term strategy. I mean, I think the city can start advocating anytime, but it will take partnerships with other organizations and cities to move the needle on that. And then another strategy is working with organizations like community land trusts, CLTs, which is a model where a nonprofit organization owns the land, and they and homeowners can purchase the homes on the land, and they're able to capture some of the equity as the home appreciates in value. But there are, they sign agreements that say that the house will continue to remain affordable. That the house, it's income restricted, so you have to be under a certain income level to qualify to purchase the home. And then if you choose to sell the home, you have to sell it to another, income qualified household. So those are two specific strategies that are working towards what you're talking about.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kimmy, one of the things I feel like you're getting at also towards is just like, maybe we reimagine housing in Beaverton too, right? Like, we can take inspiration from other places and look at how they do housing, but those are big projects, right? Because it's something we haven't seen before. So like the code and all the things that come with it. But I think it's really great because we know we have a very limited amount of like land resources, so, and that was a big emphasis of the packet as well. I had one question that as I'm reading through it, and even this kind of does go off what Councilor Kimmy is saying, is like when we look at the need for lower income rentals and for homes for purchase, I still felt like the amounts, the dollar amounts that were there still feel high because in the first job I had, I couldn't have afforded that type of monthly rent, right? So my question is really around, can we even produce homes at the price point needed for affordability in our community right now, given the cost of land, construction, SDCs, and other fees? Like, that was just kind of the thing that I was like, can we even do that at this point? And especially like knowing that median home price in Beaverton has been $500,000 recently. So that was kind of a question I had. I don't know if that's a data point that we know anything about yet, but I would love to hear more about that. Yeah, Javier. You are muted.
Yes. Thanks for that question, Councilor Hartmeyer-Prig. It is challenging, right? We're working against the market. The market keeps on rising, and property owners or developers or home builders, they want to maximize the return. And so it really, for us to have a true impact into creating affordable homeownership opportunities, it requires city investment. In all honesty, without city investment, it would be very, very limited opportunities that we would have. To your question about accessibility to lower income households, I think partnerships with organizations like Habitat are key in order to do that. And we do have those partnerships, and we look at creating those opportunities, looking at publicly owned properties that could be developed, also provides an easier access to the land that is much needed. And a little higher scale, and this is where the capacity issue comes into place, being able to talk with home builders associations or home builders where, if they're building 4 houses or 5 houses, can we talk about providing some front-end money to restrict one of those units for affordability purposes? It's having this conversation and seeing how that could work. And those are the strategies that are there. But at the end of the day, it will require city resources to be able to have any impact on that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that the near and midterm strategies, as well as the long-term strategies, are the kind of shortened list, because I know there's, I don't know, maybe even hundreds of options that your team has explored, which is so amazing. And also, we know that there is not a one size fits all. So I feel like the near term feels really good. The medium term feels really good. I do think the ADU conversation is super interesting, but I also know that there's other pieces of complexity and it's a bigger project than like, let's just make it easier, right? There's a lot of elements in there. So I know we kind of just focus on those three here, but I feel like this strategy is definitely kind of multi-layered, multifaceted. Becky, you were talking about multiple unit property tax exemption. I wanted to just clarify, is the major or the only difference from BHZ, or is that right, vertical housing zone? Yeah. Is the only difference that retail, ground floor retail is not required, or are there other things that we should be thinking about?
So they are fully separate and in state statute, and there's a lot of like very wonky specific differences between them. VHDZ, vertical housing development zones, abate up to a maximum of 80% of the building value, and it's only it's basically like the residential component of a mixed use building up to 80% of the building value. The multiple unit property tax exemption, it can be for a mixed use building, but generally it isn't, and so it exempts the full building value. That's one of the differences. And the other difference is just in flexibility. VHDZ is very prescribed how everything works in statute, and you just decide where to put it. And that's basically the only local decision. The multiple unit property tax exemption, the city has a lot of latitude to decide what the criteria are for eligibility, as well as whether it should be limited to specific areas, or if you're doing it for mixed income housing, you can apply it citywide. So you have a lot more discretion about how to kind of design a set of eligibility criteria that makes sense with what your local needs and goals are. So there's sort of the flexibility, and then the financial piece is a little bit different as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. There's part of me that felt like, well, maybe that's not needed because we have vertical housing, but it actually sounds like it is worth exploring. It's worth us considering that that's a strategy that Beaverton should implement. So yeah, I definitely think it should stay on the list. We are well over our allotted time. So I'm going to ask Councillor Husson and Councillor Teeter, sorry, to maybe take just a minute to kind of do final thoughts.
Yeah, it's a quick question. The medium-term strategies list 1.8, analyze impact of short-term rentals on overall housing supply and create regulations. Can you briefly elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can talk more about that. And Brian can feel free to jump in if I'm saying anything wrong. But essentially, we don't have short-term rentals, things like Airbnbs, as a specific land use in our development code. And we know that Airbnbs exist in Beaverton, but we don't have a real way of categorizing them in our land use code. And so they're kind of sort of treated like hotels or motels, but hotels and motels are really only allowed in like commercial zones. And we see more of these Airbnbs, short-term rentals in residential areas. So it doesn't really fit nicely. So we would want to take a look, see our short-term rentals, having a significant impact on the overall housing market. Are they taking away a lot of units that could be used for longer term rentals? And then also updating our development code to possibly create some regulations around those, at the very least, creating a clear definition.
That's awesome. I mean, my comment was going to be, I'd really like to limit those kinds of Airbnb and short-term rentals. Like our goal is to house our community. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Councillor Teeter.
Thank you. I just want to echo something the Council President shared, the question of, are we actually able to produce the homes at the price point people need? I think that was a really, really important question. Sightline Institute, I know I just mentioned them earlier, but they did some more research in Portland talking about different housing types, and will duplexes and triplexes be available at lower rates? And the research showed no, not immediately, because it doesn't financially pencil out for developers right away. But later on, it acts as that pressure release so that housing prices don't keep on rising. But I think Council President's question, like, I want us to keep that in mind as we think about non-supply oriented strategies. So like protecting manufactured homes and those zones, and also providing subsidies for people who need the financial assistance when we're in a condition to be able to do that as a city. And just maybe it's a reminder for me, but just a lens that I think we should think through as a council of, we can do it a lot on the supply side and the deregulation side, but it's got to be paired with these other stability and subsidy side too.
Thank you so much for the comment. Javier and Jenna, do you have adequate feedback from us this evening? Great. Okay. Thank you all for being with us this evening, for the great work you've done on one of the most important, policy strategies in our community right now. So thank you. That brings us to the end of our regular session. So we will be moving into executive session, which we will hold in accordance with ORS 192.660, sections 2H, to consult with council So council, we will see you on the other link. And I do not believe we have an action item after executive session. So for this meeting, Megan, can I consider the regular session adjourned?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Thank you so much. So we are adjourned from regular session. See council on executive session.